This is the Arctic. It comprises nearly 6% of the Earth's surface and is about the same size as the entire African continent. Most of it, however, is an icy ocean and has, for the last 2 to 4 million years, been a vast frozen wasteland largely uninhabited by humans. Recently, however, due to the effects of climate change, ice has been retreating in the Arctic Sea at such a staggering pace that some believe the Arctic may be completely and utterly ice-free by the year 2050. While this poses a risk to humans as a result of rising oceans and undesirable effects on marine ecosystems, for several countries, this Arctic melting is opening what some have called the scramble for the Arctic. In fact, by the middle of this century, some experts are predicting that a new transpolar shipping passage will open across the Arctic Ocean via the North Pole, a passage that would provide significant shipping and military advantages to the nations who control those waters. And many nations, in search of new resource-rich areas and strategic economic and military advantages, are quickly mobilizing to claim the once frozen Arctic as their own. In 2008, then-President of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, proclaimed, "Our first and main task is to turn the Arctic into Russia's resource base of the 21st century." And Russia has been attempting to do just that. Since 2007, Russia has reopened at least 50 Soviet-era military bases in the area, including the refurbishment of 13 air bases, 10 radar stations, 20 border outposts, and 10 integrated emergency rescue stations. Other Arctic states aren't holding back either. In 2018, for the first time in 27 years, NATO launched an aircraft carrier inside the Arctic Circle. In 2020, for the first time since the Cold War era, British and American warships entered the Barents Sea, north of Norway and close to Russia's main military posts. U.S. Vice Admiral Lisa Franchetti, the commander of the U.S. 6th Fleet, who commanded the operation, commented, "In these challenging times, it is more important than ever that we maintain our steady drumbeat of operations across the European theater. We remain committed to promoting regional security and stability, while building trust and reinforcing a foundation of Arctic readiness." In March of 2022, Norway conducted its largest military exercise inside the Arctic Circle since the Cold War. This race for Arctic supremacy is now being called the New Cold War. But who really controls the Arctic, and why does it matter? Let's find out. The United States, through Alaska, is one of 8 countries contending for the sovereignty of the Arctic's frozen seas, along with Canada, Denmark, via Greenland, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Russia, and Sweden, collectively termed the Arctic 8. Many of these countries have already filed legal petitions to a UN body, claiming portions of the huge Arctic seabed as their own. In today's resource-constrained world, timeliness could mean the difference between a profit or a loss. For cargo traveling between Asia and Europe, the traditional shipping routes from Asia travel south through the Strait of Malacca, west through the Indian Ocean, and then north through the Suez Canal, a sailing distance of nearly 20,000 kilometers that takes 29 days to complete. Contrast this route with a northerly route, termed the Northern Sea Route, that travels north up the east coast of Russia, through the Bering Strait, and west along Russia's Arctic waters. Not only are distance and fuel savings estimated to be as high as 50%, but the 29-day traditional voyage just takes 10 days, and the sailing distance would be a staggering 11,000 kilometers less than the southern route. Additionally, by cutting straight across the Arctic via a potential transpolar passage, it's estimated that a further 2 days could be saved. As a result, over the last decade alone, with Arctic ice thinning quickly, we've seen cargo transported along the Northern Sea Route grow by nearly 20 times. Unsurprisingly, as usage of these northern shipping routes increased dramatically, we see many of the nations who are part of the Arctic 8 seek to lay claim to the Arctic and its waters. So how are nations currently seeking to stake their claims to the Arctic? Let's explore. In 1982, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, also called the UNCLOS, was adopted and signed. This international treaty specified how and to what extent a country might assert sovereignty over waters extending from its borders, including those extending into the Arctic. It essentially works like this. Nations have exclusive rights to natural resources within 200 miles or 340 kilometers of their coastlines. These areas are called EEZs, or Exclusive Economic Zones. And for any claims beyond the EEZ, nations must prove that the seabed is physically connected to their nation's continental landmass. Where a country believes that an area is connected to its continental landmass, it must provide scientific evidence proving its claim to the Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf, which is a UN-appointed body who adjudicates these claims. Notwithstanding the formality of the current UNCLOS claims process, the Arctic 8 countries have been quite creative in their attempts to claim ownership. In 2007, for example, Russia adopted a simple but creative strategy. 2 Russian submarines dove below the ice of the North Pole and placed a Russian flag on the sea floor. It was the first manned expedition to reach the pole of the Arctic Ocean. Russia's motivations went beyond simply planting a flag. The explorers also gathered water and sediment samples for study in an attempt to prove that the ridge beneath the pole is an extension of the Russian land. Canada, which had previously claimed some of the same lands, was indignant. This isn't the 15th century. Canada's then Foreign Minister, Peter MacKay, stated, "You can't go around the world and just plant flags and say, we're claiming this territory." However, the real elephant in the room is that the Arctic is estimated to hold up to 22% of the world's undiscovered oil and natural gas, resources worth trillions of dollars. Since this mineral and resource wealth is now theoretically reachable, the race to claim sovereignty over the Arctic has reached an all-time high. By virtue of Russia's northern geography and massive size, the Russia coastline accounts for over 50% of all Arctic Ocean coastline. Russia cites this statistic often in its claims over the Arctic. In August 2015, the Russians upped its commitment to Arctic ownership and, relying on UNCLOS, claimed a significant portion of the Arctic Ocean as being adjacent to its continental shelf. The United Nations dismissed the claim due to a lack of sufficient scientific evidence. However, in 2015, Russia again claimed 463,000 square miles of territory, including the North Pole. Citing new data, the claim remains outstanding. So what is the solution to this ongoing dispute? While the UN claims process seems quite straightforward, actually proving that a portion of the Arctic is connected to a nation's continental shelf and that there's no overlap between continental shelves is a long and arduous task requiring long and costly scientific expeditions. As a result, in the interim, a number of solutions have been proposed to settle disputes between rival claimants to the spoils of the Arctic, such as using pie slices extending national borders all the way to the pole, extending Arctic borders equidistant from coastlines, extending exclusive economic zones out a further 200 nautical miles from current EEZs, and many others. However, to date, none of these suggested solutions have been agreed upon. Instead, Russia, Denmark, and Canada are currently attempting to demonstrate that their respective continental shelves extend beyond the conventional 200 nautical mile EEZ boundary and are requesting that their EEZs be set at 350 nautical miles from the shore. While a decision on who owns the Arctic will be vitally important, it is unlikely to happen anytime soon, and it remains to be seen who will ultimately succeed in owning the Arctic. What do you think of the current claims process? Is the Arctic worth fighting for? If so, what is the solution for the disputed territories? Let us know in the comments below. Also, if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell to be notified when we upload more content. We'll see you guys in the next one.